Have you ever met someone whose very presence felt like a quiet, undisturbed lake? On the surface, they are calm, gentle, and reflective. Yet, looking into their depths, you suddenly see a startlingly clear image of yourself, complete with the imperfections you try so hard to hide. This is often the experience of being around a person with the INFJ personality type. They do not seek conflict, nor do they intend to make anyone uneasy. And yet, people frequently find themselves on the defensive in their company. It is a strange paradox, one not born from aggression or judgment, but from an unnerving clarity. Their quiet intensity has a way of holding up a mirror to the souls of others, compelling them to confront the truths they might otherwise prefer to leave buried in the shadows of their consciousness. This phenomenon begins with their profound emotional depth. INFJs do not simply hear words. They perceive the emotional currents flowing beneath them. They are masters of the unspoken language of the heart. When they engage in a conversation, they are not merely processing data. They are connecting with the feelings behind the facade. So when someone insists, "I'm fine," while their spirit is screaming in turmoil, the INFJ senses the discord. They might not challenge it directly. Instead, they may offer a simple, almost piercing question like, "Are you sure you have the support you need right now?" In that single moment, the carefully constructed wall of denial can crumble, leaving the person feeling utterly exposed. This feeling of being seen, truly and deeply seen without consent, is profoundly unsettling for many. In my own Korean heritage, we have a concept called nunchi. It is the subtle art of instantly sensing the mood, thoughts, and intentions of others in a social situation. It's an intuitive social intelligence. An INFJ's nature is like nunchi turned into a fundamental way of being. They don't just use it, they are it. This is not a tool they wield, but the very lens through which they view the world. They are not trying to be detectives of the soul, but their empathy is so finely tuned that they simply cannot ignore the emotional truth in a room. For those unaccustomed to such emotional sincerity, this can feel invasive. They might wonder, how did they know that? I never said a word. And that bewilderment often curdles into a defensive posture, a way of protecting one's inner world from what feels like an uninvited gaze. Because their insights are so often accurate, they can inadvertently sound like criticism. Imagine a business meeting where a team is enthusiastically pushing forward a flawed plan. The INFJ, sensing the underlying instability that everyone else is ignoring, might gently voice a concern, saying, "I have a feeling we might be overlooking how this will affect team morale in the long run." To them, this is an act of care, an attempt to prevent future trouble. But to others who are invested in the surface-level optimism, it can feel like a direct challenge to their judgment. Instead of gratitude, the INFJ is met with defensive explanations and justifications. The unspoken accusation hangs in the air. Why do you have to be so negative? What they are really saying is, why did you have to see the truth we were all agreeing to ignore? Furthermore, INFJs operate from a core of high internal standards. They are driven by a deep-seated need for integrity, honesty, and purpose. This is not a standard they impose on others, but one they relentlessly apply to themselves. Yet their commitment to living an authentic life can cast a long shadow. In an environment where white lies, casual gossip, or ethical shortcuts are the norm, the INFJ's quiet refusal to participate acts as a silent rebuke. They don't need to preach or moralize. Their very conduct highlights the contrast. This makes people uncomfortable. It forces them to confront their own compromises. The guilt or insecurity that arises from this comparison is then often projected onto the INFJ, who is unfairly labeled as judgmental or self-righteous, when all they were doing was quietly abiding by their own conscience. This quest for authenticity extends to their interactions. INFJs find little nourishment in shallow conversations. They can navigate small talk, but they cannot live there. They yearn for meaningful connection, for conversations that explore the why behind the what. They want to know what truly moves you, what you fear, what you dream of. This hunger for depth inevitably disrupts the placid surface of casual social harmony. Most people use superficial chatter as a buffer, a safe and pleasant space to avoid the messiness of real emotions. When an INFJ gently tries to steer the conversation towards something more substantial, it can feel like a breach of an unspoken social contract. The other person may feel put on the spot, analyzed, or pressured to reveal more than they are comfortable with, prompting them to retreat behind a wall of defensiveness. Perhaps one of the most misunderstood traits is the INFJ's profound need for solitude. They absorb the emotional energy of others like a sponge. To prevent being overwhelmed, they must periodically retreat into their own world to process, recharge, find their center again. To an outsider, especially a partner or close friend, this withdrawal can feel like a sudden, unexplained rejection. The partner might think, "What did I do wrong? Are they angry with me?" This anxiety triggers a defensive response. They may push for answers, demand reassurance, or accuse the INFJ of being cold and distant. This in turn makes the INFJ feel smothered and misunderstood, causing them to retreat even further. It is a painful cycle, born not of malice, but of a fundamental misunderstanding of their need for emotional space as an act of self-preservation, not an act of punishment. Finally, when an INFJ is genuinely troubled or in conflict, their initial response is often silence. This is not the cold, punitive silence of someone giving the silent treatment. It is a silence of processing. They are retreating inward to carefully sort through their complex emotions and thoughts, wanting to understand their own feelings fully before they speak. They do this to avoid saying something they don't mean in the heat of the moment. However, for the person on the other end, this silence can be deafening. It creates a vacuum that their own anxieties rush to fill. They interpret the lack of response as judgment or condemnation. The guilt and uncertainty build until they burst forth in a defensive torrent of excuses or accusations, escalating the conflict that the INFJ was trying to handle with care. Their thoughtful pause is tragically misread as a weapon. Ultimately, the defensiveness an INFJ provokes is rarely a reflection of their actions, but a reflection of the other person's relationship with their own inner world. The INFJ, simply by being their authentic self, becomes a catalyst for self-reflection. Their empathy reveals hidden pains. Their integrity exposes moral compromises. Their silence forces an encounter with one's own conscience. For those who are open to growth and self-awareness, this can be an inspiring, even healing experience. They find in the INFJ a safe harbor for their own authenticity. But for those who depend on emotional masks and denial for their comfort, this same energy feels like a threat. The mirror the INFJ holds up is not one they are ready to look into. If you are an INFJ, know that your depth is a gift, not a flaw. You do not need to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. Your task is not to become less perceptive, but to learn to share your perceptions with wisdom and compassion. And if you are someone who finds yourself feeling defensive around such a person, perhaps take a gentle pause. Ask yourself what truth their presence might be illuminating within you. For the defensiveness is not truly about them. It is an invitation from your own soul, a call to look deeper, to live more honestly, and to connect in a way that is profoundly and beautifully real. If this reflection has offered you a moment of clarity, we hope you will carry that feeling of understanding with you. May it bring you peace in your interactions and courage in your own journey of self-discovery.